Ever feel like those glossy college brochures? You know, the ones they paint this picture perfect world, but when you really get down to it, they kind of gloss over the real stuff.
Mm, yeah,
And that's what we're diving into today.
right,
Like, how do you really know if a college is truly set up to support its neurodiverse students?
right.
And we've got a guide here by Dr. Jane Herricks. And let me tell you, this is not about sugarcoating anything.
Yeah.
This is about looking beyond those brochures and like really asking those kind of tough questions, you know?
Yeah, and what I find so interesting about this guide in particular is that Dr. Eric's, as a autistic Gestalt language processor themselves,
Yeah.
they bring both their personal experience and their academic research to the table.
Powerful combination.
Oh, incredibly powerful, yeah.
Oh.
It gives this perspective that I think is just so valuable.
Definitely, definitely. And speaking of valuable, I gotta say, I was kind of floored by this whole concept of the autism tax. Can you unpack that a little bit? Because to me, it just seems, I don't know, almost criminal that students would be facing these like extra hurdles just because a school isn't really meeting their needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And the autism tax is really referring to this additional effort, this extra energy that neurodiverse students, they often have to expend just to navigate systems that weren't really designed with them in mind.
Right.
It's that constant, need to adapt or mask or overcompensate just to sort of keep up. And that can be incredibly draining.
Oh, absolutely. And it makes me think of that saying, like, I'm not lazy, I'm just on energy saving mode. But in this case, it's not by choice. Like they don't really have that option. And the guide actually gives this kind of wild example. So Dr. Herx had to rewrite this whole essay
Wow.
in US English spelling just to pass an AI grading system.
Oh, wow.
I mean,
That's amazing.
it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it really highlights the limitations sometimes of these rigid systems
Yeah.
and how they can create these unintentional barriers for sure. And it really, I think, underscores the need for something called Universal Design for Learning, or UDL.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more about that.
So imagine a classroom where the curriculum itself, from the get-go, is adaptable. It's flexible, it meets different learning styles, different needs, right from the start. And that's what UDL is really aiming for. It's that proactive approach rather than waiting for problems to come up and then trying to react.
Yeah, it's like designing a building and the ramps are already built in. You're not like, oh shoot, we need to tack on a wheelchair lift as an afterthought. You know what I mean?
Exactly, exactly. You're setting everyone up for success right from the get-go.
Yes. But even with the best intentions, sometimes technology, it's a double-edged sword, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, what about proctoring software?
Oh, yeah.
On the one hand, you want to make sure things are fair academically, but on the other hand, that can be a lot of stress, especially for neurodiverse students,
Yeah.
because they might need those assistive technologies, and then those get flagged as suspicious.
Absolutely. And the guide talks about a situation where the proctoring software, it just wouldn't work with Dr. Hork's approved text-to-speech software.
Oh, wow.
And the solution, you're not going to believe this, was to give a complete stranger remote access to their entire computer.
You've got to be kidding me. Talk about a breach of trust. Right.
Exactly. It really highlights that tension that we often see between security concerns and genuine support, and how sometimes these systems can really disproportionately impact neurodiverse students. And it's important to remember, technology, it's not inherently neutral. These design choices and these assumptions that are kind of baked into these systems, they can create very real barriers for people.
It's like we're living in two completely different worlds, you know?
Yeah.
You got the idealized version of college, all shiny and happy in the brochures. Right.
And then you got like the real life experiences of neurodiverse students. And nowhere is this disconnect more obvious than when we start talking about faculty and admin, right?
Absolutely. And Dr. Herx actually talks about this, about, constantly having to sort of educate people on their needs,
Oh, I bet.
which can be so exhausting, I'm sure a lot of people listening can relate to that experience. And it really highlights, I think, this really important difference between reactive support and proactive support.
Okay, I'm listening.
So reactive support, that's kind of like, waiting for the student to hit a wall. And then you're scrambling to try to find solutions, right?
Right. But proactive support, that's different. Proactive support means the faculty, the staff, they're already informed, they're sensitive, they have the tools, to create a genuinely inclusive environment from the get-go.
Yeah, it's like that whole teach a man to fish thing, but you apply it to like inclusive education, right?
Yeah.
Instead of waiting for students to say, hey, I need help, what if that help was just already there? What if they already understood?
Right, exactly.
Man, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to something that I think we've all encountered at some point in our academic lives.
Oh, what's that?
The necessary evil, group work.
Oh, yes, group work, the source of so much collaboration,
Right?
but also so much frustration, let's be honest.
Oh, for sure. And we can all kind of joke about that one person in the group who like never shows up prepared.
Right.
But imagine like if you have a brain that just thrives on structure, you need that clear communication, and then suddenly you're thrown into this like chaotic group project where the instructions are super vague, nobody really knows what their role is.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, hello, sensory overload, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the guide actually talks about this. It's not that neurodiverse students can't work in groups. It's just that we need to recognize and accommodate these different learning styles and communication styles.
For sure.
And the good news is Dr. Hurricks actually offers some really practical advice here.
Oh, good. Good. Because I was going to say, yeah, we don't just want to complain about it. Like, what do we actually do, right?
Exactly. So instead of leaving things really open-ended, how about we have clearly defined roles within the group?
Oh, I like that. Yeah, right.
Right. Or we embrace those different communication preferences, right? Not everyone can thrive in a super chaotic brainstorming session. Some people need time to process, to think things through.
Absolutely.
And sometimes, honestly, the most inclusive thing you can do is just allow for an alternative assignment. Recognize that fairness doesn't always mean treating everyone exactly the same way.
So true. So true.
It's about creating an environment where everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed.
Which, let's be real, that's a lesson that applies way beyond college, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But okay, before we go all philosophical on this,
Right.
we can't forget about that one department on campus, often overlooked, disability services.
Oh, yes.
So we've talked about tech, we talked about faculty, group projects, but what about the actual office that's supposed to be there supporting neurodiverse students?
It's so interesting you bring that up because the guide, it actually challenges this assumption
Okay.
that just having a disability services office automatically means it's a supportive environment.
Yeah.
And Dr. Horrocks actually shares some personal anecdotes, particularly during that whole transition to online learning,
Yeah.
where support requests were basically just ignored.
Wow. So it's like the guide is saying, don't just assume, do your research.
Yes.
Because a well-staffed office, that doesn't necessarily translate into a truly inclusive culture.
Right.
And there's this one part where they talk about how disability services, it seemed more concerned with being legally compliant than with actually helping students thrive.
Yeah, unfortunately, that kind of bureaucratic approach, it's more common than we'd like to think.
Right, right.
And it really highlights how disability services can sometimes become more about, protecting the institution
Interesting.
than empowering the very students that they're supposed to be serving.
It's like instead of being like this champion for neurodiversity, it just becomes another hoop to jump through.
Yes, exactly, like checking a box.
Yeah, like it's not enough just to have something on paper, right?
Right, exactly. And what I find really empowering about this guide is that Dr. Hurricks doesn't just point these flaws out.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know.
They actually offer some really concrete steps that students and families can take to advocate for themselves.
Okay, yeah.
Like, for instance, instead of just accepting that, oh, yeah, attrition rates for neurodiverse students, they're just really high.
Right.
How about we ask colleges directly, are you even tracking this data?
Bro.
Do you know how many students are leaving and why?
Those are some powerful questions. It's like, yeah, forget the fancy brochures, forget the website. Like, let's cut to the chase.
Exactly.
What are you really doing here? What kind of support are you actually offering?
Exactly. and even beyond that, don't be afraid to ask about specific programs.
Right.
Resources. What kind of neurodiversity training have your faculty and staff actually received?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. Is there a genuine sense of awareness and commitment there? Or is it just kind of like lip service?
No. Right, right. And you know what else I really appreciated about this guy? They talk about how a truly inclusive college experience, it goes beyond just the classroom, right?
Right, absolutely, yeah.
Talk about social spaces, clubs, specifically designed for neurodiverse students, because then you're finally in this environment where, you can be your full, authentic self.
Yes, without that constant pressure to mask or to conform to those neurotypical social norms.
Exactly.
Imagine like having a space where your way of thinking, your unique perspective, it's not only accepted, but it's actually celebrated.
Oh, that would be incredible.
That's incredibly powerful, and not just for the individual student, but I think for the entire college community, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
When we create spaces for diverse minds to connect, to collaborate, everybody benefits.
Yeah, for sure. It's like that saying, if you're the smartest person in the room,
Right.
you're in the wrong
You're
room.
going to get out of there.
Yeah, exactly. We all grow when we're challenged by different perspectives.
Yeah.
So as we, kind of wrap up this deep dive here,
Yeah.
what's like the one takeaway? Like if listeners could only remember one thing, what would you want it to be?
Choosing a college, it's a huge decision.
Oh, it is. It is.
Don't just settle for a place that, like, tolerates your neurodiversity, Find a place that embraces it.
Yes.
Look beyond the surface level. Ask those tough questions and trust your gut. And remember, this fight for inclusive education, it doesn't stop at college.
So true.
It's a lifelong journey. It requires all of us to stay informed, to stay engaged, to stay committed to creating a world that values and celebrates the brilliance of all types of minds.
Beautifully said. This deep dive into Dr. Herrick's guide has been really eye-opening, to say the least. And it's just a good reminder, true inclusion, it requires more than just checking boxes. It demands that we fundamentally shift how we think about, how we design, how we experience education as a whole.
Absolutely.
So whether you're a student, a parent, an educator, or just someone who values diversity and inclusion, take this as a call to action.
Yeah.
What steps can you take in your own little corner of the world to really champion neurodiversity and create a more equitable world for all learners?